All right, guys. So, what we're doing this week is a little bit different than last week. I'm going to go over the notes for the Ohio Constitution with you, and then there's going to be a Google form that you can watch and answer those notes. So, we're going to talk about the Ohio government and Constitution today. So, Ohio's legislative branch. The next slides, what we're going to look at is what problems did Ohio's 1802 Constitution create within the legislative branch? How did the new 1851 state constitution fix those problems? And what does the Ohio legislative branch look like today? Because Ohio does have their own legislative branch, just like how the federal government has their own branch as well. All right, so the Constitution of 1802 and its issues. So, through 1803 through 1850, many problems were with the General Assembly, which is Ohio's legislation. So, the General Assembly was too powerful and dominated all the other branches. So, we didn't have separation of powers and they weren't equal. The power to choose the government officials was not with the people. The General Assembly was the ones who did that. Their powers were unchecked by the other branches, so they could do what they wanted. You had a lot of corrupt people in there, and they would pass laws that favored certain individuals, like their friends or maybe themselves. And they put the state in massive debt. So $20 million would be like $600 million today. And there was no limitation on their spending. So they were a hot mess, and they were pretty selfish, and the people actually didn't get to make any of the decisions. So that was not good. So the new Constitution is going to fix these problems a couple different ways. They're going to allow the people to elect officers and judges instead of the General Assembly, so more power is in the hands of the people. They're going to prohibit them from passing laws that favored certain individuals, so everything will be more fair, and they put a limit on the state debt. So, 750,000. This is going to change by later amendments because inflation and things like that. And money has to be borrowed for exactly what it was asked for. So if you're going to ask the people to borrow money to build a bridge, you have to build a bridge. You can't do something else with it. How does the General Assembly look like today? So the General Assembly is bicameral, so it has two houses. There's a House of Representatives and a Senate, kind of like the federal government. The House of Representatives is 99 members, and the Senate is only 33. Qualifications to be in either house: you have to be at least 18 years old and a U.S. citizen, and you have to reside for at least 30 days in Ohio and registered to vote. You have to live in the district you represent for at least 1 year. So if you represent a district in Cleveland, you can't live in Dayton, and you have to win the election. So here are two representatives from our area. You have Niraj Antani. He is in the House, and in the Senate you have Peggy Lehner. Alright, so Ohio's divided into 99 districts since there are 99 members. So that strangely drawn map is that district. We live in the Montgomery County district. West Carrollton is located in District 42. And our member in the General Assembly House, like I told you just a minute ago, is Niraj Antani. And there he is. He is a Republican. And in the Senate, we only have 33 districts since there are 33 members. And your representative is Peggy Lehner of District 6. Alright, so elections are held every 2 years. For the senators, they have 4-year terms. So every 4 years they have an election, but the House members have 2. So every 2 years they have an election. Both are subject to term limits. The max time you can serve in both houses is 8 years. 2 terms in the Senate and 4 terms in the House. 8 years in and 4 years out is the rule. You are eligible to serve again after you have spent 4 years out of office. So they do have term limits, but if you wait, you can get back in. Powers that they hold. They create state taxes and tax citizens at the state level. If you work and you look at your pay stub, you can see where you have state taxes taken out. They write state laws. They can make a law that contradicts U.S. federal law or the United States Constitution? No. So, a lot of you guys on our last assignment put that you would add in the First Amendment to the Ohio Constitution, but they don't really have to do that because the federal Constitution is still over Ohio, because the federal government and federal law trumps the state. So if the states want to say, like, you can't have freedom of speech anymore, The federal government can step in and say, no, you're protected by the U.S. Constitution. So the U.S. Constitution and the federal laws are the supreme law of the land. For example, it is unconstitutional to deny same-sex couples the right to marry. Therefore, states cannot make laws against a gay marriage, because it was decided federally that it was not against the law. Alright, let's talk about the executive branch. You've heard a lot about the executive branch over the past couple weeks. So, what problems did Ohio's 1802 Constitution create with the executive branch? How did the new 1851 state constitution fix those things? And what does the executive branch look like today? So, some of the problems that the executive branch had was Ohio's original constitution only created the governor and the secretary of state. They didn't have the other members in the executive branch to help actually run the state. Both were elected by the General Assembly and not the people. And they had very little power. Your first governor in Ohio was Edward Tiffin, and there's a picture of him for you. So really, they were kind of in control by the General Assembly, which is the latest legislative branch, so it didn't really work. How are those problems going to be fixed? So, they gave the governor some company. Now he has members in his cabinet, kind of like the president does. They gave some more powers. They expand the executive branch to provide an additional oversight and guidance. So they still gain more powers. You now have a lieutenant governor, an auditor, a treasurer, an attorney general, and the biggest one is they allowed the people to elect these officials. So if you look at this picture, you will have the governor, Mike DeWine, who you have seen on the news every day. He comes on at 2 o'clock to let you know what's going on with the coronavirus and the members of his cabinet. So, your governor is your chief executive of the state. They're like the president of the state. They set the legislative agenda. They send a budget proposal to the General Assembly. They appoint officers to agencies and judges if there is a vacancy. They're the commander-in-chief of the Ohio National Guard, which is kind of like Ohio's military. Now, Ohio's military is not going to try and fight like Kentucky. It's really just to help with things in the state. Pardon state criminals, so if you are in prison for something, he can pardon you, which means he can make your sentence go away or he can reduce it. And you have your lieutenant governor, which is basically the vice president of the state. So if something happened to Mike DeWine, your lieutenant governor, John Houston, would step in. Mike DeWine is a Republican. Alright, let's talk about the judicial branch. What problems did Ohio's 1802 Constitution create with the judicial branch? How did the new 1851 state constitution fix it? And what's the judicial branch look like today? So, some problems with the 1802 Constitution were that the judicial system of the Supreme Court and the trial courts in each county. So, you only had 9 counties when Ohio was first started. You didn't have a lot of people, so you didn't really need a lot of counties. The Supreme Court was required to travel and meet in each county once a year. So, they would have to go to one of these 9 counties every year, Ohio's Supreme Court. Over the next 50 years, the state grew to 88 counties, and that was a lot of traveling for them, so that's not going to work. So they changed it. So, some of the new things that the 1851 Constitution fixed was it created more courts and justices to lessen the amount of work. So, we created more judges, we created more smaller courts, they allowed the people to elect judges instead of the General Assembly. When you can vote, you actually get to vote on judges in your area. So, they created a District of Court Appeals to bridge the gap between the trial courts and the Supreme Court. So, we've talked about courts of appeals. You can appeal your case to the Court of Appeals, and they might be able to change it for you. They eliminated the traveling requirement, allowing the Supreme Court to stay in Columbus. So, now your Supreme Court justices of Ohio, not the federal level, don't have to travel to all these counties. The federal level always will stay in D.C., and then your state level Supreme Court is in Columbus. Alright, here is your Ohio Supreme Court. You have 7 justices. They are elected by the people, so we vote on these people. The governor appoints if a vacancy occurs between elections. They are elected to 6-year terms. They don't have term limits, and they cannot run if they are over 70 years old. So, with the federal Supreme Court, once they are there and they are elected by the president, voted on by the Senate, they're there for life. These judges are a little bit different because they are voted on by the people and they have 6-year terms. And the governor only gets to pick one if, like, let's say this guy retires. Governor DeWine will pick a new one, but then once his original term limit is over, then we get to vote on a new one. This is the court of last resort in Ohio. The only one you can appeal to if these guys overturn your thing is the Supreme Court at the federal level. Alright, guys. So that is it for the Ohio Constitution notes. So after you watch this video, or look over the PowerPoint, whichever one you want to do, you can do both. Go ahead and answer those questions on Google Forms. And that is it.